John. I appreciate it. It's good to be here. I was kind of intrigued when John asked me to come and speak at this about NRCS policy. I mean, it's really hard to talk to our own employees about NRCS policy, much less landowners and other agency people. Who wants to hear about NRCS policy? But it's important to know that the NRCS policy is there for a reason, and it's to give our employees the ability to be able to go out and assist with prescribed burns. I'm going to talk just a minute. I've been doing prescribed burns for a long time. I don't get to go out and do burns as much as I used to, but I started at Texas Tech doing it legally, and I got to thinking back when I actually first started was when I was a little bitty kid, and my grandmother would give me a box of matches and we'd go out and light her yard off every spring. Well, that was a good thing too, because I enjoyed doing it. I had no clue what we were doing, but it was fun. And then if my grandmother forgot to take the matches back, I figured out how to light some other things on fire, which, by the way, wasn't very beneficial for my backside. And then when I got to Texas Tech, I went in to see my advisor, Dr. Henry Wright, and he asked me if I've ever burned anything, and I thought, oh gosh, that's a trick question. I don't know how to answer that. And I said, well, yes, sir. And he goes, good, we're going to go light some rangeland on fire this week. And I looked at him on purpose. And then now 30 years later, I'm up in front of all y'all talking about NRCS policy on prescribed burning. Pretty cool, huh? So, yeah, and I really enjoy it. I think it's very important. But why do we want to use fire? And I threw this up there mainly. This is why. It's because it's fun. That's the definition by Pyros R Us. But prescribed fire is a safe way to apply a natural process, ensure the ecosystem health, and reduce wildfire risk. And that's an important thing. And this is from Lane Green from Tall Timbers Research Station in Florida. The wildfire risk is certainly a big issue. And I've been to the fire ecology conferences, and everybody talks about we need to get more fire on the ground, and that's what we're having a big problem with a lot of these wildfires. One of my other duties is I get to go on these wildfires as an air resource advisor now, and going to town hall meetings and talking to the public about the smoke issues and that sort of thing. And it's really interesting to understand that when the wildfire is going on, the people are really worried about it, but they also want to know why the Forest Service isn't doing more burning. And it's not the Forest Service fault, but when they go out and try to light a fire, they get a lot of pushback from the public on doing the fires. So it's a catch-22 in a lot of ways. So you saw this yesterday when Drac put this map up about how much fire actually was going across the United States throughout history, and how often the fire return intervals were. And this is important. I want you to remember this, because a little bit later I'm going to hit on something. But even though it wasn't as often, every state always had fire. So, NRCS, how many of people have seen these? The state and transition models from ecological site descriptions, okay? NRCS is behind this. And if you look here, well, this doesn't work very good. Going from one state to the other, there's transition pathways, and there's restoration pathways to get back to a state, depending on what the landowner objective is, right? So that transition pathway in these ESDs, a lot of them is lack of fire is why they transformed into this other state. Restoration pathways is prescribed fire. Well, I asked the national ecological site developers, how many of these ecological site descriptions have prescribed fire, and fire is one of the main causes of growing the states. And I was thinking it was a fairly low number. And they came back to me, they said 80 to 90% of the ESDs are going to have fire in there as part of that, which surprised the heck out of me. So that tells me that we know we need to use fire, but are we using it enough? So anyway, you see these, you got a bunch of boxes and lines, and I stole this from John Ware, but it's really just about a box of matches when you get down to it. So, NRCS policy. And the NRCS folks who've been to our trainings, they've heard this more than once. But we support and encourage the use of prescribed fire on all lands where it's going to meet a specific resource objective, okay? So we know that it's an important process that needs to be used out on the landscape. Here's the deal. In the national policy, it specifically states that we encourage our employees to participate in all prescribed burning activities. Okay? Only trained and qualified personnel are authorized to provide this assistance in designing, planning, and implementing these prescribed burns. So that means that NRCS employees, through national policy, are allowed to go out there and assist these landowners with prescribed burning activities. And we have what's called job approval authorities that are set up that are progressive in nature, so the more that you go out on burns and do more plans, you're able to move up and do more complex burns as you go on. Now, how much that employee can assist is going to be based on that job approval authority and how good they are. When I came to Oklahoma, I was very fortunate. I had great folks to work with, plus the Oklahoma State University, but also had a state conservationist that understood the benefits ecologically of what prescribed fire and getting fire on the ground was, and we got to burn a lot. And we also had a lot of staff in the field at the time, and there were days when it was burn season, if you will, that we could empty out a couple of field offices and go out there and light some fires. And like John said, getting the burn association going was a big part of that as well. But they wanted some people out there that had the knowledge of burning to do that. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, you're writing a plan, I can write down anything on paper. They'll go hand it to a landowner, and just say, well, see you later. You know, the employee, in my view, if you're not out there on the burn paying attention to fire behavior, you don't need to be writing a burn plan. Because that plan is the only thing that's going to save your butt when, you know, if something goes wrong. And something's going to go wrong, but if you know what you're doing, it doesn't ever get very big. And John probably talked about it at some point. You know, usually when you get some slop over, it's less than an acre in size. So anyway, but it's important to know that. Right off the bat, we'll go with questions. So, I kind of did a little survey a couple of years ago, and why doesn't NRCS get to participate more in different states? Okay, and I think there's 5 or 6 states in the nation that don't even have prescribed burning as a practice within their system. So those 5 or 6 states don't even use it. There's quite a few states, when you start looking at national policy, we give you the states the latitude to do that, but states can be more restrictive on how they go about it. So they can restrict their employees more with the job approval authorities and that sort of thing to limit their participation on prescribed burning. So therefore, you get some folks that say it's not allowed. Nationally it is, but some states may not want to. State and local laws. I don't know much about this one, but I think this is just put up there. I don't know of any law exactly that prohibits NRCS from going out and participating. But there are state and local authorities that maybe are the ones that handle the prescribed burning operations for those areas. Remember that map I showed you earlier? I've got this back, and this, they said, well, we're not a historical fire state, so, you know, we don't do burning. According to that map we showed you, and the Jack showed you yesterday, every state is a historical fire state. And I've read some books, and it was amazing to me that how much the Native Americans used fire in all the states across the nation. Here's the big one. This is a funny one too. Well, I guess not funny, but the perception that fire is dangerous. Wow, that's pretty good. If that's the case, then so's playing with pencils, you know. I think, and DRAC did a paper a couple of years ago, and prescribed burning it barely made the list as far as dangerous jobs. Is that right? I won't go into it too much because it's been a couple of years since I read it. So prescribed burning is if you know what you're doing and you're out there and you have a good plan and you're following the plan, you're going to be just fine. Liability is the big one. I think the states, as far as NRCS goes, as well as landowners, the liability, they're scared to death of the attorneys and everybody coming after them. NRCS, being a government agency, has got the biggest pockets, so they're definitely going to want to go after NRCS or agency personnel as much as possible. But as far as NRCS, when we were working with the landowner, they signed a statement saying that the landowner is liable for anything that happens when we do this. So that takes a little bit off. The other issue is what we've gotten into now is the programs, contracting, and our staffing issues. And now there's not as many staff in the field offices that are able to get out. And I think that, like when we had the good burn days in Oklahoma, and we could clear out a couple of field offices, there was still somebody there to take care of some of the other issues and visit with the producers. Now there's not enough in the field offices to be able to get out. And I think some states are saying, we need you in there to do this, do the programs. The media coverage of wildfires is always a bad thing. The perception there again that it's dangerous, and what you get when they just see smoke is, oh my gosh, we got to stop this. And then I get this one, that we don't participate with the producers in other practices. Well, with our discipline in range and pasture, there's not another practice that has a policy tied to it that says you can go do this. So I don't buy that one either. So, but I think the big elephant in the room is certainly the liability issue. So we did a paper, an issue paper that we sent to Washington, and at this moment we haven't gotten any feedback, but it had to do with the liability as far as NRCS employee being out there on the burns participating. And we sent that to the Office of General Counsel along with our national policy. And what we got back from them was basically NRCS employees and their supervisors will not be held liable in their individual capacity as long as they're acting within the scope of their employment. So in other words, you have to break a mandate or violate policy intentionally to be held liable personal or that supervisor. So pretty much we're covered. Even if they do, generally the government is going to take over into the lawsuit. So it's kind of interesting how that works. So the outlook of prescribed fire. This is some numbers that I pulled up from 2009, and this is from our system of how many acres we're getting applied on the ground. And this is either, it doesn't matter if it's contracted or not, but you look here, and this is nationwide. If these numbers were by county, 430,000, 300,000, that'd be pretty good acreage. We're not getting enough out on the ground doing that. This isn't counting all the fires. These are just the ones that NRCS has some planning influence with. So we need the help of other people. So we have what's called technical service providers. If you sign up as a technical service provider, you can go out and assist with these landowners in doing these burns, and you work out a contract with that landowner on how much you charge, and then the landowner can get paid through EQIP or WHIP, one of those things. Other federal agencies can't sign up as a TSP, but I think there is some leeway when it comes to other NGOs like the Nature Conservancy and stuff like that. They could do that and get some payments. We also, within that, you're doing the prescribed burn, that's one thing, but there's a lot of planning that goes on. So we have what's also called these conservation activity plans, where the producer can ask a TSP to come and write the plan for them, if they like to, and they will get paid for that plan. And you can see here that, you know, it's based on acreage. So if you go write a plan that's less than 20 acres, you know, we know it takes some time, but you can work out a deal with that producer and get paid for doing that prescribed burn plan. That doesn't have anything to do with actually doing the burn. That's a separate deal. So to get more fire on the ground, and with the staffing issues that we have, and Sal may talk about that a little bit in a minute, but this is one way we can go about it. And certainly the prescribed burn associations across, especially through this area, we could do a lot with that. And money is always an issue. You need pumper trucks, you need equipment, that sort of thing. This is a way to do that, is helping NRCS out as a technical service provider. So, I'm pretty much done, but there's a quote by Kip Pharaoh: the difference between genius and stupidity is that genius has its limits. And I'll tell you right now, I'm no genius. So, oh yeah, and if you go over graves, you don't have to worry about the wildfires either. I forget about that. So, with that, I'm pretty much done. I'll take some questions if you have some. Yes. The question was, can a burn association become a TSP? And the answer is yes. They limit it on federal agencies because that's federal money going back to another. Anyway, there's rules. But I think the burn associations would be an excellent way to be excellent TSPs. Plus, I mean, you can get certified. The state resource conservationists and state conservationists say, yeah, they're good. So when you write a plan and everything, we don't have to go and double check it. Anybody else? Was I too quick? No, you were perfect. No?